Her billionaire CEO ex-husband left her to marry his mistress because she was barren. She came back with triplets to interrupt his wedding. Stop the wedding. Damien, who is that woman? Why does she have children with her? Those are your children, Damien. Archer, Jasper, and Isla. They're 2 years old, and they're yours. That's impossible. You told me she was infertile. You said she could never give you children. The doctors were wrong, or maybe they were right, and this was just a miracle. Either way, I found out I was pregnant 2 months after you threw me away like garbage. Vivian, I don't understand. How is this possible? You don't get to ask me questions, Damien. You don't get to stand there in your $1,000 suit about to marry your mistress and demand answers from me. You made your choice 3 years ago when you told me I was worthless because my body failed me. Are you our daddy? Now, let me take you back to where this all began. 3 years before this moment. 3 years before Vivian walked into that cathedral and shattered the perfect wedding that Damien Ashford had planned. Because you need to understand what kind of man leaves his wife when she needs him most. You need to understand the cruelty that led to this moment. And you need to understand why Vivian made the choice to keep those children a secret for 2 whole years. The doctor's office was cold. Vivian would remember that detail for the rest of her life. How the air conditioning was turned up too high, how she'd wrapped her arms around herself trying to stay warm, how Damien had sat beside her with his phone in his hand, checking emails while they waited for news that would change everything. Dr. Sarah Chen had walked in with a folder in her hands and a practiced expression of sympathy on her face. She'd done this before, delivered bad news to hopeful couples, watched dreams crumble in sterile examination rooms. I'm sorry, Mrs. Ashford. The test results are conclusive. Your condition makes natural conception virtually impossible. The scarring from the infection you had 2 years ago is too extensive. The fallopian tubes are blocked, and the uterine lining has been compromised. Vivian had felt the words hit her like physical blows. Each medical term was another nail in the coffin of the future she'd imagined, the children she'd dreamed of, the family she'd wanted to build with the man she loved. What are our options? Damien's voice had been flat, emotionless, like he was asking about stock options or investment portfolios, not about their future children. There are several paths you could explore. In vitro fertilization is one option, though given the extent of the scarring, success rates would be lower than average, perhaps 20 to 30% per cycle. Surrogacy is another possibility. Or adoption, of course. Many couples find that. How much time do we have to decide? Damien had interrupted the doctor mid-sentence. Vivian had turned to look at her husband, searching his face for some sign of emotion, some indication that he was as devastated as she was. But his expression had been blank, closed off, already distant. There's no rush, Mr. Ashford. This is a lot to process. I'd recommend you both take some time to discuss your options. Perhaps speak with a counselor who specializes in fertility issues. The emotional impact of this kind of diagnosis can be significant, and it's important that you support each other through this. The drive home had been silent. Damien had kept his eyes on the road, his hands gripping the steering wheel, his jaw tight. Vivian had stared out the window, watching the city blur past, feeling like she was drowning, and no one could see her going under. When they'd gotten home to their penthouse apartment, the one with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, the one that had felt like a palace when they'd first moved in, Damien had poured himself a scotch. It was 3 p.m. We need to talk about this. Vivian had been standing by the window, her arms wrapped around herself again. Still cold despite the warmth of their home. What is there to talk about? You heard the doctor. We have options. Do we? Damien had taken a long drink, then set the glass down with a sharp click against the marble countertop. What does that mean? It means I need an heir, Vivian. The Ashford legacy can't end with me. My father built this company from nothing. He started with one property and turned it into an empire. I've tripled the value since I took over. I have a responsibility to pass that on to my son or daughter. What? You said son. But it could be a daughter. If we pursue IVF or adoption, it could be a girl. Damien had looked at her like she was missing the point entirely. The gender doesn't matter. What matters is that I need my own child, my own blood, not someone else's baby that we adopt, not a child carried by a stranger. Mine. The words had cut deeper than the doctor's diagnosis, because in that moment, Vivian had understood something terrible. She hadn't just lost the ability to have children. She'd lost her value in her husband's eyes. We can try IVF. The doctor said it's possible. With a 30% success rate, that means a 70% chance of failure. How many cycles are we supposed to go through? How much time and money are we supposed to invest in something that probably won't work? So what are you saying? Damien had finished his scotch and poured another. His third drink, and it wasn't even dinner time. I'm saying I need to think about what's best for my future, for the company's future. And what about our future? What about our marriage? He hadn't answered, and in that silence, Vivian had felt the foundation of her life begin to crack. The next few weeks had been a slow-motion disaster. Damien had started staying late at the office, coming home after Vivian was already in bed, leaving before she woke up. They'd stopped having dinner together, stopped talking about anything beyond logistics and schedules. Vivian had tried. God, she'd tried. She'd made his favorite meals and left them warming in the oven. She'd suggested couples counseling. She'd researched IVF clinics and adoption agencies, printing out information and leaving it on his desk. But Damien had built a wall between them, and nothing she did could break through. Then came the night she'd found the receipts. She'd been looking for their insurance documents, digging through Damien's desk drawer when she'd found them. Receipts from expensive restaurants, the kind of places you took someone you were trying to impress. Dates and times when Damien had told her he was working late or meeting with clients. Her hands had been shaking as she'd pulled out her phone and opened his credit card statement online. She'd known his password. They'd never had secrets before. Or so she'd thought. The charges had told a story. Jewelry stores, flower deliveries, hotel rooms, all in the past month, all while he'd been pulling away from her, making her feel like she was the problem, like her broken body had broken their marriage. She'd confronted him that night when he'd finally come home at 11:30, smelling like expensive perfume that wasn't hers. Who is she? Damien had frozen in the doorway of their bedroom, his tie already loosened, his jacket over his arm. What are you talking about? Don't lie to me. I found the receipts. I saw the credit card charges. Who is she? For a long moment, he'd just looked at her. And then, instead of denying it, instead of apologizing or showing even a shred of remorse, he'd sighed, like she was being inconvenient, like she was the one in the wrong. Her name is Celeste Moreau. The casual way he'd said it had been worse than if he'd shouted, worse than if he'd tried to lie, because it meant he didn't even care enough to hide it anymore. How long? 6 weeks? 6 weeks? A month and a half? While she'd been grieving the children they'd never have, while she'd been trying to save their marriage, he'd been building a new life with someone else. Who is she? She's the daughter of Richard Moreau. He's one of my biggest investors. We met at a business dinner. Of course. Of course it was someone from his world, someone who could offer him something beyond love, beyond partnership. Are you sleeping with her? Damien had walked past her to the closet, hanging up his jacket with careful precision. Yes. The simple admission had stolen her breath. She'd known, of course, the evidence had been clear, but hearing him say it out loud had made it real in a way that shattered something inside her. How could you? How could I? Vivian, you can't give me what I need. You can't give me a family. You can't give me an heir. What did you expect me to do? I expected you to love me. I expected you to honor the vows we made, for better or worse, in sickness and in health. Remember those words, Damien? Remember standing in front of everyone we know and promising to be there for each other no matter what? That was before I knew you were defective. The word had hit her like a slap. Defective, like she was a broken appliance, a faulty product, something to be discarded and replaced. Get out. What? Get out of this room. Get out of my sight. I can't look at you right now. This is my house. Then I'll leave. She'd grabbed her purse and her keys and walked out, driven to her friend Sarah's apartment and collapsed on her couch in tears. Sarah had held her while she'd sobbed, had listened while she'd poured out the whole story, had promised her that she deserved better. But promises didn't change reality. When Vivian had returned home the next morning, she'd found Damien in the kitchen drinking coffee like nothing had happened. "We need to talk. I agree. I want a divorce." She'd expected him to fight, to apologize, to beg for another chance. Instead, he'd nodded. "I think that's for the best," just like that. 3 years of marriage dismissed with 6 words. "I'll have my lawyers draw up the papers. The prenup is clear, but I'll make sure you're taken care of financially. You'll get the settlement we agreed on, plus an additional sum for your trouble." "For my trouble? You're paying me off?" "I'm being fair, Vivian. More than fair. You'll have enough money to start over, to build a new life. I don't want your money. I want my husband back. I want the man I married, the one who told me he'd love me forever, the one who said I was enough just as I am. That man believed he was marrying someone who could give him a family. I can give you a family. We have options," the doctor said. "I don't want options. I don't want to spend years and hundreds of thousands of dollars on treatments that probably won't work. I don't want to adopt someone else's child and pretend it's mine. I want my own son or daughter, my own blood, and Celeste can give me that." There it was, the real truth. He had already decided, already chosen his mistress over his wife, already planned his future without her in it. "So I'm just disposable now? 3 years of marriage means nothing because my body failed me? Don't be dramatic." "Dramatic? You're leaving me for another woman because I can't have children, and I'm being dramatic?" "I'm leaving you because our marriage no longer serves my needs. Celeste is young, healthy, and from a good family. Her father's investment in my company will allow me to expand into 3 new markets. And yes, she can give me children. Multiple children if I want them. It's a better arrangement all around." An arrangement? That's what he'd called it. Not love, not partnership. An arrangement? Does she know? Does Celeste know that you're only with her because she has a working uterus and a rich father? She knows what she needs to know, that I'm a successful man who can provide her with a comfortable life. That's enough for most women, but not for me. I actually loved you, Damien. I didn't marry you for your money or your company. I married you because I thought we were building a life together. I thought we were partners. We were, until you couldn't hold up your end of the partnership. The cruelty of it had left her speechless. This man, the one she'd shared her bed with, the one she'd trusted with her heart, had reduced her entire worth to her reproductive system. And because that system had failed, she was worthless. The divorce had moved quickly. Damien's lawyers had been efficient and ruthless. Vivian had been too shattered to fight. She'd signed the papers in a fog, barely reading the terms. She'd taken the settlement money, packed her belongings, and left the penthouse that had been her home. She'd driven for hours with no destination in mind, just needing to get away from the city, from the memories, from the life that had imploded around her. She'd ended up in a small coastal town 3 hours north, the kind of place where tourists came in the summer and locals knew everyone's business. She'd rented a small cottage overlooking the ocean. 1 bedroom, a tiny kitchen, a living room with windows that faced the water. It was nothing like the penthouse, nothing like the life she'd had. But it was hers. And right then, that was enough. The landlady was a woman named Margaret, 70 years old, with kind eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. She'd taken one look at Vivian's hollow eyes and thin frame and had immediately adopted her. "You look like you need a good meal and a friend. I can provide both." Margaret had been true to her word. She'd brought casseroles and homemade bread. She'd invited Vivian for tea and listened without judgment when Vivian had finally told her story. She'd become the mother figure Vivian had lost years ago when her own parents had passed away. For 2 months, Vivian had existed in a fog. She'd barely eaten. Sleep had been impossible, her mind replaying every moment of her marriage, every sign she'd missed, every indication that Damien's love had been conditional. The weight had fallen off her already slim frame. Dark circles had carved themselves under her eyes. She'd stopped bothering with makeup or nice clothes. What was the point? There was no one to see her, no one to care. Her friends from the city had called, but she'd let every call go to voicemail. She couldn't bear their pity, couldn't stand the careful way they'd ask if she was okay when clearly she wasn't, couldn't handle their unspoken relief that it was her marriage that had fallen apart, not theirs. Then came the morning she'd woken up and barely made it to the bathroom before she was violently sick. At first, she thought it was just grief manifesting physically, her body finally catching up to her broken heart. But when the nausea had continued for a week, when she'd found herself exhausted by 10 in the morning, when certain smells had started making her gag, Margaret had put her foot down. "You're seeing a doctor." "Today." "No arguments. I'm fine. It's just stress." "Stress doesn't make you throw up every morning for a week straight. Get in the car." Margaret had driven her to the local clinic, a small building that served the town's medical needs. The doctor was young, maybe 30, with a gentle manner and thorough questions. "When was your last period?" Vivian had frowned, trying to remember through the fog of the past months. "I don't know. 2 months ago, maybe 3. Everything's been so chaotic I haven't been paying attention. Any chance you could be pregnant?" "No, I'm infertile. I was diagnosed 4 months ago, scarring from an infection. The doctor said natural conception was virtually impossible." The young doctor had nodded slowly. "I'd still like to run a test just to rule it out. If it makes you feel better, but I'm telling you, it's not possible." But she'd given the urine sample anyway, had sat in the examination room flipping through outdated magazines while the test was processed, had expected nothing. So when the doctor had returned with a strange expression on her face, part confusion and part wonder, Vivian's heart had started to race. "Mrs. Ashford, it's just Vivian now. I'm divorced. Vivian, I don't quite know how to tell you this, but the test is positive. You're pregnant." The world had tilted sideways. The magazine had slipped from her hands. Her ears had started ringing. "That's impossible. I ran the test 3 times to be sure. You're approximately 9 weeks along. I'd like to do an ultrasound to confirm and check on the baby's development, but there's no doubt. You're pregnant, but the scarring, the blocked tubes," the doctor said. "Sometimes medicine doesn't have all the answers. Sometimes things happen that we can't explain. Some people might call it a miracle." A miracle. After everything that had happened, after all the pain and loss and grief, her body had done the impossible, had created life when everyone had said it couldn't. Vivian had walked out of that clinic in a daze, one hand pressed to her still flat stomach. Margaret had taken one look at her face and pulled over. What did the doctor say? "I'm pregnant." Margaret's eyes had filled with tears. "Oh, sweetheart, that's wonderful. That's a miracle. I don't understand how this happened. The doctors were so sure. Does it matter how? You're going to have a baby." But the reality had been more complicated than joy. Because Vivian's first instinct had been to call Damien, to tell him that the universe had given them a second chance, that the baby he'd wanted so desperately was growing inside her right now. Her hand had been on her phone, his number pulled up when she'd remembered. "I need my own blood, my own child. You can't give me what I need." She was defective. He'd thrown her away, had chosen his mistress over his wife, had reduced her to a single function and found her lacking. He'd made his choice, and now she would make hers. Damien didn't deserve to know about this baby, didn't deserve to be part of this miracle. He'd had his chance at a family with her, and he'd destroyed it. This child was hers, only hers. The decision had crystallized in that moment, sitting in Margaret's car overlooking the ocean. She wouldn't tell him. Wouldn't give him the opportunity to take this away from her too. This baby was her second chance, her new beginning, and Damien Ashford had no place in it. "Are you going to tell the father?" Margaret had asked the question gently, but Vivian had heard the judgment underneath. The concern. "No." "Sweetheart, he has a right to know. He gave up his rights when he divorced me for being infertile. He made it very clear that he wanted nothing to do with me, that I was worthless to him. Why would I tell him now? Because it's his child too, is it? He didn't want a child with me. He wanted a child with someone else, someone who wasn't broken. Well, now he can have that, and I'll have this." Margaret had looked like she wanted to argue, but something in Vivian's expression had stopped her. "All right, if that's what you want, I'll support you." But Vivian, raising a child alone is hard, especially without family nearby. "I'll manage. I have the settlement money. I can find work. I'll figure it out." And she had. The pregnancy had been difficult. The morning sickness had lasted well into the second trimester. She'd been exhausted constantly, falling asleep at odd hours, struggling to keep food down. But she'd never been happier. Every flutter of movement, every kick, every hiccup had been a reminder that miracles were real, that her body wasn't broken, that she was enough. The 12-week ultrasound had brought another shock. Well, this explains why you're measuring large. The technician had been moving the wand across Vivian's gel-covered stomach, her eyes on the screen. What do you mean? The technician had turned the screen so Vivian could see. 3 distinct shapes. 3 tiny forms with visible heartbeats. Congratulations. You're having triplets, 3 babies, 3 impossible miracles. Vivian had started crying right there on the examination table, overwhelmed by joy and terror in equal measure. 1 baby had seemed manageable, but 3? How would she handle 3 infants alone? How would she afford it? How would she physically manage? But even through the fear, there had been wonder. 3 children, 3 chances at the family she'd always wanted, 3 reasons to keep going. Margaret had stepped up in ways Vivian could never have anticipated. She'd helped convert the cottage's second bedroom into a nursery, had thrown a baby shower with the local women, most of whom Vivian barely knew, but who'd shown up with gifts and advice and offers of help. Had coached Vivian through her fears late at night when the enormity of what was coming had threatened to overwhelm her. The owner of the local bookshop had offered Vivian a job doing their online marketing and social media, work she could do from home on her own schedule. The couple who ran the cafe had brought her meals when she'd been too exhausted to cook. The retired nurse who lived down the street had given her a crash course in infant care. This small town, this community of near strangers, had given her what Damien's wealth never could: a support system, a family. The triplets had arrived 5 weeks early. Vivian had been at home when her water had broken, had called Margaret in a panic, had been rushed to the hospital 30 minutes away. The delivery had been fast and intense. 3 babies born within 20 minutes of each other, 2 boys and a girl. Tiny and perfect, each weighing just over 4 pounds. They'd spent 2 weeks in the NICU, growing stronger, learning to eat and breathe on their own. And Vivian had been there for every moment, her hands through the incubator ports, her voice reading stories, her presence constant. She'd named them carefully, deliberately choosing names that had no connection to Damien or his family. Archer, born first, with serious dark eyes that seemed to take in everything. Quiet and observant even as an infant. Jasper, born second, who'd come out screaming his displeasure and hadn't stopped demanding attention since, bold and fearless from his first breath. And Isla, born last, the smallest but fiercest, delicate features and a will of iron. She'd known what she wanted from day one, and made sure everyone else knew too. The first months had been a blur. Vivian had moved through her days in a fog of exhaustion, learning to function on 2 hours of sleep, mastering the art of tandem feeding, changing what felt like 1,000 diapers a day. There had been moments when she'd broken down crying, overwhelmed by the sheer magnitude of caring for 3 infants alone. But there had also been moments of pure joy. The first time all 3 babies had slept through the night, the first smiles, the first laughs, watching them grow from helpless newborns into babies with personalities and preferences. Archer loved to be held and read to, his eyes following the pictures in board books with intense focus. Jasper was happiest when he was moving, bouncing, exploring. Isla demanded to be the center of attention, crying if her brothers got picked up before her, smiling when she got her way. Margaret had been there through all of it, holding babies when Vivian needed a shower, bringing groceries when Vivian couldn't get to the store, sitting with her during the hard nights when the exhaustion had felt like too much. "You're doing an amazing job, sweetheart. I don't feel like I am. I feel like I'm barely surviving." That's what the first year is. Survival. But look at them. They're healthy and happy and loved. That's what matters. And they were. Despite everything, despite being born early and raised by a single mother, still healing from heartbreak, the triplets thrived. They hit their milestones. They grew. They laughed. By their first birthday, Vivian had found her rhythm. She'd built her event planning business, working with clients remotely, creating beautiful weddings and corporate events from her laptop while the babies napped. The work was fulfilling and flexible, allowing her to be present for her children while still contributing financially. She'd made friends in town, other mothers who understood the chaos of raising toddlers, neighbors who waved when she walked by with her triple stroller, shop owners who knew her by name and always had a smile for her babies. She'd built a life, a good life, a happy life. And she'd done it without Damien Ashford. For 2 years, she'd successfully put him out of her mind. She didn't check his social media, didn't Google his name, didn't ask mutual friends about him. He was part of her past, and she'd left him there. Until the day Margaret had shown up at her door with the society section of the city newspaper. I don't know if you want to see this, but I thought you should know. Vivian had taken the paper with trembling hands, and there, on the front page of the society section, was a photo that made her blood run cold. Damien and Celeste posed in formal wear, his arm around her waist, both of them smiling at the camera. The headline read, "Billionaire real estate mogul Damien Ashford to wed Celeste Moreau in cathedral ceremony." Vivian had scanned the article, her heart pounding. It gushed about their whirlwind romance, though Vivian knew the truth. It had been going on for 3 years, since before her divorce was even finalized. The article talked about their business partnership, how Celeste's father's investment had helped Damien expand his empire into new markets. But it was the final paragraph that had made Vivian's hands shake with rage. The couple has expressed their eagerness to start a family, with Ashford stating, "Building a legacy is about more than business. It's about creating something that will outlast you. Celeste and I are excited to begin that journey together. Building a legacy, creating something that will outlast you." The same words he'd used when he'd told Vivian she wasn't enough, when he'd explained why he needed to leave her, why she was disposable. And now he was saying them about another woman, about his mistress, the woman he'd cheated with while Vivian had been grieving their childless future. The hypocrisy of it had stolen her breath. "What are you going to do?" Margaret's voice had been gentle, but Vivian had heard the steel underneath. Margaret had been there through everything, had seen Vivian at her lowest, had helped her rebuild, and Margaret had never forgiven Damien for what he'd done. Vivian had looked at her children, playing with blocks on the living room floor. Archer was building a careful tower, his tongue poking out in concentration. Jasper was knocking it down, laughing at his brother's frustrated expression. Isla was clapping and cheering for both of them, delighted by the chaos. They were 2 years old now, walking and talking and full of personality. They asked questions constantly. Why is the sky blue? Where do birds sleep? What makes the ocean move? They were curious and bright and beautiful, and they had no idea who their father was. Vivian had told them age-appropriate truths, that their daddy lived far away, that he didn't know about them, that it was complicated, and she'd explain more when they were older. They had accepted this easily, the way children do. Their world was full and happy. They didn't feel the absence of something they'd never known. But they deserved more than that. Deserved to know where they came from. Deserved the chance to have a father, if he was willing to step up. And Damien deserved to know what he'd thrown away. I'm going to tell him the truth. The decision hadn't been easy. For days, Vivian had wrestled with it. Part of her wanted to protect her children from potential rejection. What if Damien didn't want them? What if he accused her of lying? What if he tried to take them away? She'd consulted with a lawyer, a woman in the next town over who specialized in family law. If he's the biological father, he has rights. He could petition for custody or visitation. But given that you've been the sole caregiver for 2 years and he had no knowledge of their existence, the court would likely favor you retaining primary custody. He'd probably get visitation rights if he wanted them. And if he doesn't want them, then nothing changes. You continue as you have been. But Vivian, if you're going to tell him, you need to be prepared for any outcome. He might want to be involved. He might not. He might try to fight you for custody. You need to protect yourself and your children. Vivian had left that meeting with a plan. She wouldn't call or write. Damien would ignore her or have his lawyers intercept any communication. No. She needed to confront him in a way he couldn't dismiss or delegate. She needed to show him what he'd lost. The wedding was scheduled for a Saturday afternoon at the cathedral in the city. The same cathedral where Vivian and Damien had been married 4 years ago. The irony wasn't lost on her. She'd planned carefully, bought the children new outfits, navy suits for the boys that made them look impossibly grown up, a cream-colored dress for Isla with a matching ribbon for her dark curls. She'd chosen a simple emerald dress for herself, one that brought out her eyes and showed that she'd moved on, that she'd survived. The drive to the city had taken 3 hours. The triplets had been excited, thinking it was an adventure. They'd sung songs and played I Spy and asked a million questions about where they were going. "We're going to see someone very important." "Who, Mama?" "Someone who needs to know about you." "Is it our daddy?" Archer's question had been innocent, but it had made Vivian's hands tighten on the steering wheel. "Yes, sweetheart. We're going to meet your daddy. Why doesn't he know about us?" "It's complicated, baby, but he's going to know soon." The cathedral had been magnificent, all soaring ceilings and stained glass windows that cast colored light across the pews. Vivian had arrived early, parking down the street, watching as guests arrived in expensive cars wearing designer clothes. This was Damien's world, the world she'd left behind, the world that had chewed her up and spit her out. She'd waited until the ceremony had begun, until she could hear the organ music swelling, until she knew Damien would be at the altar with his bride, surrounded by witnesses, locked into the moment. Then she'd taken her children's hands and walked through those massive oak doors. The afternoon light had streamed through the stained glass, painting them in shades of gold and blue and red. 500 guests had turned to look. 500 pairs of eyes had landed on her and the 3 small children at her side, and Vivian had spoken the 3 words that would change everything. Stop the wedding. If you've ever felt like you weren't enough, if you've ever been thrown away by someone who claimed to love you, stay with me. Because this story is about to show you that sometimes the people who hurt us the most end up regretting it for the rest of their lives. Hit that like button if you're invested in seeing what happens next. The silence that followed Vivian's words was absolute. The organ music cut off mid-note. The rustle of expensive fabric stopped. Even the children seemed to sense the weight of the moment, pressing closer to their mother's legs. Damien stood frozen at the altar, his hand halfway to lifting his bride's veil. He was older than Vivian remembered, lines around his eyes that hadn't been there 3 years ago, gray threading through his dark hair at the temples. But he was still handsome in that sharp, dangerous way that had first attracted her. His eyes found hers across the length of the cathedral, and in that moment, Vivian saw recognition, shock, confusion. Then his gaze dropped to the children. Archer stood on her right, his small hand gripping hers tightly. He was the most cautious of the 3, the one who observed before acting. His dark eyes, so like Damien's, were wide as he took in the massive space. Jasper was on her left, already trying to pull away to explore. He had Damien's adventurous spirit, his need to conquer and claim. Even at 2 years old, he was fearless. And Isla stood in front of her, one hand clutching Vivian's skirt, the other holding a small stuffed rabbit she refused to go anywhere without. She had Vivian's delicate features, but Damien's strong will. Vivian watched as Damien's eyes moved from one small face to another, watched as the color drained from his face, watched as his hand dropped away from his bride's veil. Vivian? Her name on his lips after 3 years of silence. It sounded wrong, like he'd lost the right to say it. "Hello, Damien." Her voice was steady, calm. She'd practiced this moment in her mind 1,000 times, had imagined every possible reaction, had prepared herself for anger, denial, dismissal. "What are you doing here?" His bride, Celeste, had turned to look at him. Even through the veil, Vivian could see her confusion, her growing alarm. "Damien, who is that woman? Why does she have children with her?" Vivian took a step forward, her children moving with her. The guests were whispering now, a low buzz of speculation filling the cathedral. "Those are your children, Damien. Archer, Jasper, and Isla. They're 2 years old, and they're yours." The words rang out clear and strong. No room for misinterpretation, no ambiguity. Celeste's hand flew to her mouth. Several guests gasped. Someone in the back pulled out their phone. "That's impossible." Celeste's voice was shrill, panicked. "You told me she was infertile. You said she could never give you children. That's why you left her. The doctors were wrong. Vivian kept her eyes on Damien as she spoke. Or maybe they were right, and this was just a miracle. Either way, I found out I was pregnant 2 months after you threw me away like garbage. Vivian, I don't understand. Damien had descended 1 step from the altar, his eyes still locked on the children. How is this possible? You don't get to ask me questions, Damien. Vivian's voice hardened. You don't get to stand there in your $1,000 suit, about to marry your mistress and demand answers from me. You made your choice 3 years ago when you told me I was worthless because my body failed me. I never said that. You said I was defective. You said our marriage no longer served your needs. You said you needed your own blood, your own child, and I couldn't give you that. So you found someone who could. She gestured to Celeste, who had gone pale beneath her veil. Well, congratulations, Damien. You got what you wanted, your own blood, your own children, 3 of them. They just happened to come from the wife you discarded. Mama, why are you upset? Isla's small voice cut through the tension. Vivian looked down at her daughter, whose lower lip was trembling. I'm not upset, sweetheart. I'm just talking to this man. Is he really our daddy? Archer's question was directed at Damien, who seemed unable to look away from the boy. I think so. Damien's voice was hoarse. You look like me. We do? Jasper had stopped trying to pull away, his attention caught by this tall stranger. You have my eyes, my hair, my chin. Damien took another step down, then another, moving toward them like a man in a trance. How old did you say they were? 2. They turned 2 3 months ago. Damien's jaw clenched. Vivian could see him doing the math. 9 months of pregnancy plus 2 years. They would have been conceived right around the time of the divorce, maybe even before it was finalized. Why didn't you tell me? The question came out as barely more than a whisper. Why would I? Vivian's voice was sharp now, all the anger she'd been holding back for 3 years rising to the surface. You made it very clear you wanted nothing to do with me. You threw me away because you thought I was broken. You married your mistress before our bed was even cold. Why would I tell you? Because they're my children. Damien's voice rose, echoing through the cathedral. Isla started to cry. Immediately, Vivian scooped her daughter up, settling her on her hip and rubbing her back. Shh, it's okay, baby, it's okay. He's just loud. He's not mad at you. Isla buried her face in Vivian's neck, her small body shaking with sobs. Vivian glared at Damien over her daughter's head. Lower your voice. You're scaring her. I'm sorry. Damien ran a hand through his hair, a gesture Vivian remembered from their marriage. He'd always done that when he was stressed. This is insane. Celeste had found her voice again, stepping down from the altar to stand beside Damien. She's clearly lying, trying to ruin our wedding. Damien, tell her to leave. I'm not lying. Vivian's voice was ice, and I have medical records, birth certificates, and DNA if you need proof. But I think we both know I'm telling the truth. She shifted Isla, who had stopped crying but was still clinging to her. Look at them, Damien. Really look at them. You don't need a test. You know. And he did. Vivian could see it in his face, the recognition, the dawning horror, the realization of what he'd lost. Damien, this is ridiculous. Celeste grabbed his arm, her perfectly manicured nails digging into his sleeve. She's obviously trying to extort money from you. Have security remove her. She's not lying. Damien's voice was flat, dead. What? Those are my children. I can see it. They have my features, my coloring. They're mine. That's impossible. You said she couldn't have children. Apparently I was wrong. He pulled away from Celeste, taking another step toward Vivian and the triplets. Archer, the bravest of the 3, looked up at him with solemn eyes. Are you our daddy? The question, asked in that small, clear voice, broke something in Damien. Vivian saw it, the crack in his armor, the flood of emotion he couldn't control. He dropped to his knees, bringing himself to the children's level. His eyes were wet. I think I am. Mama said you live far away. I do. I did. I didn't know about you. Why not? Because sometimes grown-ups make mistakes, and I made a very big one. Jasper, never one to be shy, stepped forward. He reached out and touched Damien's face, his small hand patting Damien's cheek. "You're really tall." Despite everything, despite the chaos and the pain and the 3 years of separation, Damien laughed. It was a broken, desperate sound, but it was genuine. "You're really small. We're two." Jasper held up 2 fingers proudly. "That's what your mama said. 2 years old. We have birthdays, with cake." "What kind of cake?" "Chocolate." All 3 children answered in unison, and Damien laughed again. Tears were streaming down his face now, and he didn't bother to wipe them away. Vivian watched this exchange with a tumult of emotions. Part of her wanted to snatch her children away, to protect them from the man who'd hurt her so deeply. But another part, the part that had driven 3 hours to interrupt this wedding, knew that they deserved this moment. They deserved a father, even if that father had to earn the title. "Damien!" Celeste's voice was shrill now, panicked. "What are you doing? Get up, tell her to leave. We have a wedding to finish." "Do we?" Damien stood slowly, his eyes never leaving the children. "Do we really, Celeste? What kind of question is that?" "Of course we do. We've been planning this for months. Everyone we know is here. You can't seriously be considering. I have children." His voice was wondering, awed. "I have 3 children, 2 sons and a daughter. They're mine. They're not yours." Vivian's voice cut through his wonder. "Not yet. You don't get to be their father just because you share DNA. You have to earn it. I will." Damien turned to her, his expression desperate. "Whatever it takes, Vivian, I'll prove it to you. To them. I'll be the father they deserve." "Will you?" Vivian's voice was skeptical. "Because 3 years ago you told me you needed an heir. You needed your own blood. Well, here they are. Your own blood. 3 of them. But they're not heirs, Damien. They're children. They're people. They need more than a name and a trust fund. They need a father who shows up, who puts them first, who loves them unconditionally. I can do that. Can you? Because the man I was married to couldn't love anyone unconditionally. His love came with requirements, with expectations, and when I couldn't meet them, he threw me away. I was wrong." Damien's voice cracked. "I was so wrong, Vivian. I was cruel and selfish, and I threw away the best thing that ever happened to me. But I'm not that man anymore. Aren't you?" Vivian gestured to the cathedral, to the elaborate wedding, to Celeste standing in her designer gown. "Because from where I'm standing, you're about to make the same mistake again, marrying someone for the wrong reasons, building a legacy on a foundation of lies. It's not fair, isn't it? Why are you marrying her, Damien? Do you love her, or is she just another arrangement, another business deal?" "Damien, don't listen to her." Celeste had moved to his side again, her voice pleading. "She's trying to manipulate you. We love each other. We're building a life together. Do you love her?" Vivian asked the question directly, her eyes locked on Damien's. "Do you love Celeste the way you claim to love me, or is she just convenient? Rich father, good connections, fertile womb?" "Stop it." Celeste's voice was venomous now. "You have no right to come here and ruin this. Damien chose me. He left you because you were broken, because you couldn't give him what he needed. And yet, here I stand." Vivian's voice was calm, but there was steel underneath. With 3 healthy children, his children, the legacy he wanted so badly. Turns out I wasn't broken after all. I just needed to be away from him to create something beautiful. The words hit their mark. Celeste's face contorted with rage, and Damien looked like he'd been slapped. "You kept them from me." His voice was accusatory now. "For 2 years you kept my children from me. I had a right to know. Did you?" Vivian shifted Isla to her other hip. "Did you really, Damien? Because the last time we spoke, you told me our marriage no longer served your needs. You told me you were moving on with someone who could give you what you wanted. You made it very clear that I was disposable, that my only value was my ability to produce an heir." She took a step closer, her voice dropping but losing none of its intensity. "So when I found out I was pregnant, when the doctors told me it was a miracle, when I felt these babies growing inside me, I made a choice. The same choice you made when you walked away from our marriage. I chose myself. I chose my children, and I chose to build a life without you. But they're mine too. Are they? You didn't want them when you thought they'd come from me. You only want them now because they exist, because they're proof that you were wrong about me. That's not true, isn't it? The cathedral had erupted in whispers again. Phones were out now, recording everything. This would be all over social media within the hour. The scandal would be enormous. Vivian found she didn't care. Let them talk. Let them judge. She'd survived worse than gossip. I came here today to give you a choice. She looked at Damien, then at Celeste, then back to Damien. You can walk away. Marry Celeste. Pretend this never happened. I'll take my children and go back to our life, and you'll never hear from us again. No. The word burst from Damien. No, I can't do that. Or Vivian continued as if he hadn't spoken. You can step up. Be the father these children deserve. But Damien, if you choose them, you have to really choose them, not as heirs or legacy or proof of your virility, as people, as your children, and you have to earn their trust, and mine. I choose them. Damien didn't hesitate. I choose them. I choose you. I choose all of it. Damien, no. Celeste grabbed his arm again, her voice desperate. You can't be serious. We're getting married. Today. Right now. Everyone is here. My father invested millions in your company. You can't just walk away. Watch me. Damien pulled his arm free, his eyes never leaving Vivian and the children. I already made the mistake of choosing wrong once. I'm not doing it again. You'll regret this. Celeste's voice was venomous. You'll regret this for the rest of your life. I'll make sure of it. My father will pull his investment. Your company will suffer. And for what? For some woman who kept your children from you? For 3 bastards who... Don't! Damien's voice was dangerous now. Don't you dare call them that. They're my children, and you will not speak about them or their mother that way. Celeste stared at him for a long moment, her chest heaving. Then she ripped off her veil and threw it at his feet. You're a fool, and you deserve everything that's coming to you. She stormed down the aisle, her father and several guests following. The cathedral descended into chaos. Some people were leaving. Others were staying to watch the drama unfold. Everyone was talking at once, but Vivian only had eyes for Damien, who was staring at the children with an expression of wonder and terror. What happens now? His voice was quiet, almost lost in the noise around them. Now you prove that you mean it. You don't get to be their father just because you made a scene at your own wedding. You have to show up, consistently. You have to put them first. You have to earn it. I will. I swear to you, Vivian. Whatever it takes, however long it takes, I'll prove it. We'll see. Vivian's tone was guarded. She'd heard his promises before, had believed them once. She wouldn't make that mistake again. But Damien, if you hurt them the way you hurt me, I will make sure you never see them again. Do you understand? I understand. Isla, who had been quiet through this exchange, suddenly perked up. She looked at Damien with her big dark eyes. Are you coming to our house? Damien looked to Vivian, a question in his eyes. We're staying at a hotel tonight, in the city. You can visit tomorrow. We'll talk about arrangements. Thank you. The words were barely more than a breath. Thank you, Vivian. Don't thank me. I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing it for them. She adjusted her hold on Isla and took Archer and Jasper's hands. Come on, babies. Let's go. As they turned to leave, Archer pulled his hand free and ran back to Damien. He wrapped his small arms around Damien's leg in a quick hug. Bye, Daddy. The word, so simple and innocent, made Damien's knees buckle. He dropped down and pulled Archer into a proper hug, his eyes squeezed shut. Bye, buddy. I'll see you tomorrow, I promise. Okay. Archer pulled away and ran back to Vivian, taking her hand again. They walked down the aisle together, 500 pairs of eyes watching them go. Behind them, Damien stood alone at the altar of his ruined wedding, watching his family leave. The family he'd never known existed, the family he'd thrown away before they'd even had a chance. And for the first time in 3 years, Damien Ashford understood what he'd lost. If you're feeling this story, if Vivian's strength is inspiring you, if you want to see what happens next, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Drop a comment and tell me, do you think Damien deserves a second chance? Can people really change? Trust me, you don't want to miss what happens next. Vivian just interrupted Damien's wedding to reveal the 3 children he never knew existed. He chose them over his bride. But choosing them and earning them are 2 very different things. Let's see if Damien Ashford is capable of becoming the man his children deserve. The hotel room was quiet, too quiet after the chaos of the cathedral. Vivian sat on the edge of the bed watching her children sleep in the adjoining room through the open doorway. They'd crashed hard after the excitement of the day, not fully understanding what had happened, but exhausted nonetheless. Her phone had been buzzing non-stop for the past 3 hours. Text messages from old friends who'd seen the videos already circulating online. Calls from reporters somehow got her number. Emails from people she hadn't spoken to in years, all wanting the story, the details, the drama. She'd turned it off finally, silenced the noise. She needed to think. What had she done? For 2 years, she'd built a life separate from Damien, a life where she was in control, where her children were safe and loved and protected from the man who'd broken their mother's heart. And in one afternoon, she'd shattered that safety. She'd exposed them to him, given him access, opened a door she might not be able to close again. Margaret had called before Vivian had silenced her phone. Her voice had been gentle but concerned. "Are you all right, sweetheart?" "I don't know. I don't know if I did the right thing. You did what you thought was best for those babies. That's all any mother can do. But what if he hurts them? What if he disappoints them? What if he's still the same man who threw me away? Then you'll protect them, like you always have. But Vivian, what if he's not? What if he's changed? Don't those children deserve the chance to know their father?" And that was the question that had been haunting Vivian since she'd made the decision to go to that cathedral. Did her children deserve a father who might hurt them? Or did they deserve the chance to find out if he'd changed? She didn't have an answer. Across the city, Damien sat in his penthouse apartment, still wearing his wedding suit. He hadn't bothered to change, hadn't bothered to turn on the lights as the sun set and darkness filled the space. He just sat on the couch, staring at nothing, his mind replaying the afternoon over and over. 3 children, his children, 2 years old, walking and talking and looking at him with his own eyes. He'd missed everything. First steps, first words, first birthdays. 2 years of their lives had happened without him. 2 years he could never get back. And it was his own fault. If he hadn't been so focused on legacy and bloodlines and building an empire, he might have had this all along. If he hadn't thrown Vivian away like she was defective, if he hadn't been so cruel and cold and calculating, those children might have been born into a family, into love. Instead, they'd been born into the aftermath of his destruction, raised by a mother he'd broken, growing up without a father because he'd been too blind to see what mattered. His phone rang. He ignored it. It had been ringing constantly since he'd left the cathedral. Celeste's father, threatening legal action, business partners, concerned about the scandal, friends, curious about the drama, reporters, hungry for the story. He didn't care about any of it. All he could think about was the way Archer had hugged him, the way Jasper had touched his face, the way Isla had asked if he was coming to their house, the casual trust in their small voices, the innocence. They didn't know what he'd done to their mother. Didn't know he'd called her defective, didn't know he'd thrown away their chance at being a family before they'd even existed. But they would. Eventually, they'd be old enough to understand, and they'd hate him for it. Unless he proved he'd changed, unless he became the father they deserved, unless he earned the title they'd so easily given him. Daddy. The word echoed in his mind. He'd never thought he'd hear it. Had spent 3 years building a life designed to produce that word from a child who didn't exist yet. And all along, 3 children who already called him that had been growing up without him. He pulled out his phone and opened it to the photos that were already everywhere online. Someone had recorded the whole confrontation, posted it to social media. It had gone viral within an hour. He watched himself drop to his knees in front of the children, watched himself cry, watched the moment his entire world had shifted on its axis. And then he scrolled through the comments. Some people were sympathetic, calling it romantic, saying he'd made the right choice, praising him for choosing his children over his wedding. But others were vicious, calling him a fool, saying Vivian was a gold digger, speculating about paternity, suggesting the whole thing was a setup. Those comments made his blood boil. They didn't know Vivian, didn't know her strength, her integrity, her fierce love for those children. She wasn't after his money. She'd made that clear. She'd built a life without him, a good life from what he could see. She didn't need him. But maybe, just maybe, she'd let him prove he could be what their children needed. He set an alarm for 6 in the morning. He'd told Vivian he'd visit tomorrow, but he hadn't specified when. He'd be there first thing, ready to start proving himself, ready to fight for his family. The knock on the hotel room door came at 7:30 in the morning. Vivian had been awake since 6, the children since 6:15. They were eating breakfast, making a mess of pancakes and syrup, when the sound echoed through the room. She knew who it was before she opened the door. Damien stood in the hallway, looking like he hadn't slept. His hair was disheveled, his eyes were red. He wore jeans and a simple shirt, so different from the designer suits she remembered. In his hands he held 3 small stuffed animals, a lion, a tiger, and a bear. I didn't know what they liked, so I got all 3. His voice was uncertain, nervous. Vivian had never seen him nervous before. She stepped back, letting him in. The children looked up from their breakfast, syrup on their faces, recognition dawning. "It's the tall man," Jasper announced this with delight, as if Damien were a celebrity. "His name is Damien, or you can call him Dad if you want to, but that's up to you." Vivian kept her voice neutral. She wouldn't force this, wouldn't make her children call him anything they weren't comfortable with. Damien crossed the room slowly, like he was approaching wild animals that might spook. He knelt beside the table, bringing himself to their level again. "Good morning. I brought you something." He held out the stuffed animals. Archer reached for the lion immediately, hugging it to his chest. Jasper grabbed the tiger and made it roar. Isla took the bear and kissed its nose. "Thank you." Archer's manners were impeccable, a testament to Vivian's parenting. "You're welcome. What are you eating?" "Pancakes. Mama makes the best pancakes. Do you want some?" Isla's offer was innocent, generous. She held out a syrup-covered piece on her fork. "I'd love some." Damien opened his mouth and Isla fed him the bite. He chewed and swallowed, his eyes never leaving his daughter's face. "That's delicious. Your mama is a good cook. The best." All 3 children agreed enthusiastically. Vivian watched this exchange from the doorway, her arms crossed, her guard still up. It was easy to bring gifts, easy to be charming for an hour. The real test would come later, when the novelty wore off, when parenting got hard. After breakfast, Damien helped clean up. He was clumsy with it, clearly not used to wiping syrup off small faces and hands, but he tried. That counted for something. "Can we go to the park?" Jasper's request was directed at Vivian, but he looked at Damien hopefully. "We can go to the park, if Damien wants to come with us." "I do. I absolutely do." The park was busy for a Sunday morning. Families everywhere, children on swings and slides, parents pushing strollers, dogs chasing balls, normal life happening all around them. Vivian sat on a bench, watching as Damien followed the triplets to the playground. Archer wanted to swing. Jasper wanted to climb. Isla wanted to go down the slide but was too scared to climb the ladder alone. Damien pushed Archer on the swing, his movements careful. Spotted Jasper as he climbed higher than he probably should. Carried Isla up the ladder and went down the slide with her on his lap, her delighted squeals carrying across the park. Other parents watched, some with curiosity, some with recognition. The video from yesterday had spread far and wide. Damien Ashford and his secret children were the talk of the internet, but if Damien noticed the stares, he didn't show it. His attention was completely on the children, learning their personalities, their fears and preferences, the way Archer needed encouragement but Jasper needed boundaries, the way Isla demanded attention but also gave affection freely. After an hour, the children were tired, hot and sweaty and ready for a break. They collapsed on the bench next to Vivian, drinking the juice boxes she'd brought. Damien sat on the other end of the bench, maintaining distance, respecting boundaries. "They're amazing." His voice was soft, awed. "They are. You've done an incredible job with them. They're polite and kind and confident. That's all you. It's not just me." Margaret helped, and the community. It takes a village. I'd like to be part of that village, if you'll let me." Vivian turned to look at him, really look at him. He looked different than he had 3 years ago, softer somehow, more human, less like the cold businessman who'd calculated her worth and found her lacking. "This isn't going to be easy, Damien. You can't just show up with stuffed animals and expect everything to be fine. You hurt me, badly, and I won't let you hurt them. I know, and I will spend the rest of my life making up for what I did to you. But Vivian, I'm not asking for forgiveness, not yet. I'm just asking for a chance. Let me prove I've changed. Let me be their father, on a trial basis, supervised visits. You don't take them anywhere without me. You don't make promises you can't keep, and the second I think you're going to hurt them, this ends. Understood?" Understood. The relief on his face was palpable. "Thank you. Thank you, Vivian. Don't thank me yet. Being a parent is hard. It's exhausting and frustrating and relentless. Let's see if you can handle it." Over the next few weeks, Damien showed up. Every day, sometimes twice a day. He came to the hotel where Vivian and the children were staying while she figured out what came next. He came to the park and the zoo and the children's museum. He came for meals and bedtime stories and early morning cartoons. He learned their routines, that Archer needed quiet time in the afternoon or he got overwhelmed. That Jasper needed to run and play or he got destructive. That Isla needed cuddles and attention or she got clingy. He learned their preferences. Archer liked books about space and animals. Jasper liked anything with vehicles. Isla liked princesses and tutus and anything pink. He learned their quirks. Archer hummed when he was concentrating. Jasper talked to himself when he played. Isla sang made-up songs about everything she did. And slowly, carefully, he started to become part of their lives. Vivian watched it all with a careful eye, looking for signs of the old Damien, the impatient, calculating businessman who valued results over process, but she didn't see him. This Damien was patient when Jasper had a meltdown in the grocery store, was gentle when Archer got scared of the dark, was playful when Isla demanded he play Tea Party for the 3rd time in one day. This Damien showed up even when it was hard, even when the children were cranky or difficult, even when parenting was boring or frustrating. He was trying, really trying. But Vivian's guard stayed up, because trying was one thing, sustaining it was another. 1 month after the interrupted wedding, Vivian made a decision. She couldn't stay in the city. This wasn't her home anymore. The coastal town was where she'd built her life, where her support system was, where her business was based. If Damien wanted to be part of their lives, he'd have to come to them. She told him over coffee while the children napped in the hotel room. His face had fallen. "You're leaving. I'm going home. This was never permanent. I have a life there, a business, friends, Margaret. The children have their routine, their preschool. I can't uproot all of that, I understand." But his voice said he didn't. "Not really. So what does this mean? I only see them on weekends? Holidays? That's up to you." Vivian kept her voice neutral. "You could visit, drive up on weekends. We could arrange regular times. Or..." Damien set down his coffee cup, his decision clearly already made. "I could move there." Vivian blinked. That was not what she'd expected. "Move there? Damien, your company is here. Your whole life is here. My life is with them now. Everything else is just details. You can't just uproot your entire existence. That's not sustainable. You'll resent it, resent them. I won't. Vivian, I've spent the last month getting to know my children, and I've realized something. All those years I spent building an empire, chasing success, accumulating wealth, none of it matters. None of it made me happy. But them, they make me happy. Being their father makes me happy." He leaned forward, his eyes intense. "I can run my company from anywhere. I can relocate the headquarters or work remotely. I can sell it if I have to. But I can't miss any more of their lives. I've already missed 2 years. I won't miss another day." Vivian studied his face, looking for deception, for the angle, for the calculation. But all she saw was sincerity. "This isn't a small decision, Damien. That town is nothing like the city. It's quiet, small. Everyone knows everyone's business. There's no 5-star restaurants or luxury shopping. It's normal life. Good. I'm tired of the other kind." And she believed him. Against her better judgment, against all her protective instincts, she believed him. Okay, you can move there, but Damien, the same rules apply. You're on trial. You don't get to be their father just because you relocated. You have to keep showing up, keep proving yourself. I will, I promise. 2 weeks later, Damien bought a house 3 blocks from Vivian's cottage. Nothing like the penthouse he'd left behind, just a simple 3-bedroom house with a yard and a porch, room for the children to visit, to eventually stay overnight if Vivian ever trusted him enough for that. He'd sold his penthouse, relocated his company's headquarters to a nearby city, close enough to commute when necessary, but far enough that his old life felt distant. He'd cut ties with most of his former social circle, the people who'd been at that wedding, the people who'd watched his humiliation and posted it online. He didn't need them, didn't want them. They were part of a life he was leaving behind. His new life was simpler, smaller, better. He picked the children up twice a week, taking them for a few hours while Vivian worked. He showed up for dinner on Sundays. He attended their preschool events, sitting in tiny chairs and clapping for their performances. He learned to change diapers and make mac and cheese and read the same bedtime story 17 times without complaint. He became a fixture in their lives, and slowly Vivian's guard started to lower. She saw the way he looked at the children, like they were miracles, like he couldn't believe they were real. She saw the way he listened when they talked, giving them his full attention. She saw the way he put them first, canceling business meetings if they conflicted with his time with the kids. This wasn't the man she'd divorced. This was someone new, someone better. But she still couldn't fully trust it, couldn't fully trust him. 6 months after the interrupted wedding, Damien asked if he could take the children to the beach, just him and them. No Vivian supervising. It was a test. They both knew it. Vivian's instinct was to say no, to keep control, to protect her children from potential disappointment. But Margaret's words echoed in her mind. You can't protect them from everything. Sometimes you have to let go and trust. So she said yes. She watched from the cottage window as Damien loaded the children into his car. The SUV he'd bought specifically for them, with car seats properly installed and a trunk full of beach toys. She watched them drive away, her heart in her throat, and then she waited. 3 hours later, they returned, sandy and sunburned and exhausted. Archer was asleep on Damien's shoulder. Jasper was chattering about the sandcastle they'd built. Isla was showing off the shells she'd collected. Damien looked tired but happy, more relaxed than she'd ever seen him. They had a great time. We built a castle, found some crabs. Jasper tried to eat sand. I did not. Jasper's indignant protest made everyone laugh. You did too. You said you wanted to see what it tasted like. It was yucky. That's why we don't eat sand, buddy. The easy affection between them made Vivian's chest tight. This was what she'd wanted for her children, a father who loved them, who showed up for them, who made them laugh. But it was also terrifying. Because the more involved Damien became, the more power he had to hurt them, to disappoint them, to leave. That night, after the children were in bed, Damien lingered. Usually he left right after bedtime stories, respecting Vivian's space. But tonight he seemed reluctant to go. Can we talk? Vivian nodded, pouring them both tea. They sat on the porch, the ocean visible in the distance, the sound of waves a constant backdrop. I know I'm still on trial. I know you don't fully trust me yet, and I understand why. I destroyed that trust 3 years ago. Damien's voice was quiet, serious. But Vivian, I need you to know something. I'm not going anywhere. This isn't a phase. This isn't me trying to ease my guilt or play at being a father until it gets hard. This is my life now. They're my life now. He turned to look at her, his eyes reflecting the porch light. And so are you. Vivian's breath caught. Damien, I'm not asking for anything. I'm not expecting you to forgive me or take me back or give me another chance at us. I know I don't deserve that. But I need you to know that I still love you. I never stopped. I just lost sight of what mattered. And by the time I realized what I'd thrown away, it was too late. It is too late. Vivian's voice was firm, even as her heart raced. What we had is gone. You killed it when you called me defective, when you chose your mistress over your wife, when you made me feel worthless. I know, and I will regret that for the rest of my life. But Vivian, I'm not the same man I was then. These past 6 months have changed me. You've changed me. They've changed me. People don't change that easily. You're right. It hasn't been easy. I've had to face every terrible thing I said to you, every way I failed you, every moment I chose wrong. I've had to rebuild myself from the ground up, but I'd do it 1,000 times over if it meant I could be the man you and our children deserve. Vivian wanted to believe him. God, she wanted to believe him. But belief required trust, and trust required time. I need more time. Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere. And he wasn't. As the months passed, Damien continued to show up, continued to prove himself, not just to the children, but to Vivian. He supported her business, referring clients and helping with marketing. He fixed things around her cottage without being asked. He brought groceries when he knew she'd had a busy week. He remembered her coffee order and her favorite flowers and the way she liked her eggs cooked. He courted her the way he should have the first time, with patience and respect and genuine interest in who she was, not just what she could give him. And slowly, carefully, Vivian felt herself softening toward him. It started with small things, letting him stay for dinner more often, accepting his help with bedtime routines, laughing at his jokes, sharing stories about her day. Then, bigger things, trusting him with overnight visits, letting him take the children for a whole weekend, consulting him on decisions about their education and health care. He'd become her partner again, her co-parent, her friend. And somewhere along the way, she realized she'd forgiven him, not because he'd earned it through some grand gesture, but because he'd shown her, day after day, that he'd truly changed, that he valued her not for her ability to bear children, but for herself, that he loved their children not as heirs or legacy, but as people. 1 year after the interrupted wedding, Vivian and Damien were walking on the beach. The children were running ahead, chasing seagulls, their laughter carrying on the wind. Damien stopped walking, turned to face her, took her hand. Vivian, I know I don't deserve a second chance. I know I hurt you in ways that should be unforgivable. But you've given me the greatest gift, not just our children, but the opportunity to become the man I should have been all along. He pulled a small box from his pocket and dropped to one knee in the sand. I'm not asking you to forget the past. I'm asking you to build a future with me. To let me spend the rest of my life proving that you made the right choice. Will you marry me? The children, seeing their father on his knee, came running back. What's happening? Archer's question was curious, not alarmed. Are you okay, Daddy? Isla looked concerned. I'm perfect. I just asked your mom to marry me. What did she say? Jasper demanded, always impatient for answers. Vivian looked down at Damien. This man who'd broken her and then painstakingly put her back together. This man who'd learned to put his family before his ambition. This man who'd chosen love over legacy. Yes, I'll marry you. The children erupted in cheers. Damien stood and pulled Vivian into his arms, kissing her as the sun set over the ocean. The triplets wrapped their arms around both their parents' legs, creating a tangle of family and love and second chances. Their wedding was nothing like the cathedral spectacle that had been interrupted. This one was small and intimate, just family and close friends on the beach at sunset. The triplets served as ring bearers and flower girl, taking their duties very seriously. When Damien and Vivian exchanged vows, they spoke not of forever, but of today, of choosing each other day after day through the hard moments and the beautiful ones. I promise to value you, not for what you can give me, but for who you are. I promise to be the partner you deserve, the father our children need, and the man I should have been all along. Damien's voice was thick with emotion as he spoke. I promise to trust you, to believe in the person you've become. I promise to build this life with you, to face whatever comes together, and to never forget that love is a choice we make every single day. Vivian's tears streamed down her face as she said her vows. When they kissed, their children cheered. The small gathering erupted in applause, and as the sun set over the ocean, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Damien held his wife and watched their children play in the sand. He thought about the man he'd been, so focused on legacy that he'd missed the life right in front of him, so obsessed with building an empire that he'd destroyed his family, so blind to what mattered that he'd thrown away everything. He'd almost lost it all, almost missed the chance to know these incredible children, almost let Vivian slip away forever. But she'd given him a second chance, had let him prove he could change, had trusted him with the most precious things in her life, and he would spend the rest of his days being worthy of that trust. 5 years later, Vivian stood in the doorway of their home, the one they'd bought together, the one filled with laughter and chaos and love. She watched Damien help the triplets with their homework. Archer was working on a science project, his tongue poking out in concentration. Jasper was supposed to be practicing spelling but kept getting distracted by their dog. Isla was drawing elaborate pictures in the margins of her math worksheet. Isla, focus. Damien's voice was gentle but firm. I am focused. I'm making it pretty. Math doesn't need to be pretty. Everything needs to be pretty, Daddy. Damien caught Vivian's eye and smiled, that smile that still made her heart skip. She rested a hand on her swollen belly. Another miracle, another impossibility made real. This time, Damien had been there for every moment, every doctor's appointment, every ultrasound, every bout of morning sickness. How are you feeling? He'd noticed her hand on her stomach. Good. Active. I think this one's going to be a soccer player, or a dancer like Isla, or a reader like Archer, or a troublemaker like Jasper. They both laughed. The triplets looked up. What's funny? Jasper demanded to know. Nothing, buddy. Just talking about your little brother or sister. I hope it's a sister. I need someone on my side. Isla declared this with absolute certainty. You have Mom on your side, Archer pointed out logically. That's different. I need a sister. Well, we'll find out in a few months. Vivian moved into the room. All 3 children abandoned their homework to cuddle against her. Careful, don't squish the baby. Damien's warning was automatic now. We're not squishing. We're hugging. Gentle hugging, Archer clarified. Isla pressed her ear to Vivian's belly. I can hear it. That's my stomach growling. Someone didn't let me finish lunch. I'll make dinner. Homework first, though, all of you. A chorus of groans followed, but the children returned to their work. Damien dropped a kiss on Vivian's head as he passed. I love you. I love you too. As he moved into the kitchen, Vivian watched him go. This man who'd hurt her so deeply. This man who'd changed so completely. This man who'd proven that people could grow, that second chances were possible, that love could survive even the deepest wounds. Their journey hadn't been easy. There had been setbacks and arguments and moments when Vivian had doubted, but Damien had never stopped showing up, never stopped choosing them, never stopped proving that he'd changed. And now, 7 years after that devastating divorce, 5 years after that interrupted wedding, they had built something beautiful. Not perfect, not without scars, but real and strong and full of love. Outside, the sun was setting over the ocean. Inside, a family gathered around the dinner table. Imperfect and hard-won, and absolutely perfect in every way that mattered. This was their legacy. Not an empire or a fortune, not bloodlines or business deals, but love. The kind of love that showed up every day, that chose commitment over convenience, that valued people over possessions, that survived mistakes and grew stronger. Damien had spent years chasing the wrong kind of legacy, building wealth and power and influence, but none of it had made him happy. None of it had fulfilled him. This chaotic, beautiful, ordinary life. This was what mattered. These children who called him Daddy. This woman who'd given him a second chance. This family they'd built from the ashes of his worst mistakes. He'd almost missed it. Almost thrown it all away before it even existed. But Vivian had walked into that cathedral with 3 children and 3 words that changed everything. Stop the wedding. Those words had shattered his carefully constructed life, had exposed his lies and his cruelty and his misplaced priorities, had forced him to face what he'd lost and what he'd become. And in the wreckage of that moment, he'd found his redemption. Not through grand gestures or expensive gifts, but through showing up, through putting his children first, through earning back the trust he'd destroyed, through becoming the man his family deserved. As they sat around the dinner table, the triplets talking over each other, Vivian laughing at their stories, the baby kicking in her belly, Damien felt something he'd never felt in all his years of business success. Peace, contentment, joy. This was enough. They were enough. He was enough, not because of what he'd built or what he owned or what he'd achieved, but because he was loved, because he loved, because he'd learned what truly mattered, and he would never forget it again. Later that night, after the children were asleep and the house was quiet, Damien and Vivian sat on the porch, the same porch where he'd proposed, where they'd had countless conversations, where they'd rebuilt their relationship one honest moment at a time. Do you ever regret it? Vivian's question was soft. Giving me another chance? Damien was quiet for a moment, considering. No. Never. You gave me the greatest gift, Vivian. You gave me our family. You gave me the chance to become someone better. You gave me a life worth living. He took her hand, threading their fingers together. I regret what I did to you. I regret the pain I caused. I regret the time I missed with our children. But I don't regret where we are now, because this, right here, is everything I never knew I needed. Vivian leaned her head on his shoulder. I'm glad I interrupted that wedding. So am I. Best decision you ever made. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars come out over the ocean. Two people who'd been broken and had found healing. Two people who'd made terrible mistakes and had found forgiveness. Two people who'd lost everything and had built something better from the ruins. Their story wasn't a fairy tale. It was messy and complicated and real, but it was theirs. And it was beautiful. Because sometimes the greatest love stories aren't about perfection. They're about redemption, about second chances, about choosing to show up day after day, even when it's hard, about learning what truly matters and holding onto it with everything you have. Damien had learned that lesson the hard way, but he'd learned it. And he would spend the rest of his life grateful for the woman who'd taught him, the woman who'd walked into a cathedral with 3 children and changed his life forever. The woman who'd given him everything he'd ever wanted, even though he hadn't deserved it. The woman he loved more than anything in the world. His wife, his partner, his second chance, Vivian. And that's where our story ends. Damien and Vivian's journey from heartbreak to healing, from cruelty to compassion, from broken to whole. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that people can change and second chances are possible, please hit that like button and share this video. Leave a comment and tell me what you think. Do you believe Damien truly changed? Would you have given him a second chance? I'd love to hear your thoughts. And don't forget to subscribe to Mr. Wellington Story Hour for more stories about life, love, and the lessons we learn along the way. Remember, your worth is never defined by what others think you can give them. You are enough, exactly as you are. Until next time, this is Mr. Wellington, reminding you that sometimes the best legacies aren't built in boardrooms. They're built around dinner tables, in bedtime stories, and in the everyday moments of choosing love. Thank you for listening.